Hi,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, we're doing.
Yeah, same.
And we made it 15 minutes later. Glad that worked for you too.
Yeah, it was actually perfect. Baby boy just went down to sleep like 5 minutes ago. So we were in the same boat.
Awesome. Both babies are asleep and they're going to sleep through this whole thing.
Fingers crossed.
Mine's actually not feeling super well, so she's been taking like 2 to 3 hour naps.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That would be nice.
I know. It's like really long. I had to wake her up at 7:45 this morning, and she had been sleeping since 7 p.m. last night.
Wow.
I was like, this is not normal, and you don't feel good.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm excited for this chat. I feel
Yeah.
like so many people have questions. So let's just dive in. We're gonna, talk about what we can. And I think the first topic we wanted to hit on was just the best way to prepare for like postpartum nutrition,
Yeah.
because I think we both know that a lot of the focus postpartum is on the baby and preparing for the baby and making sure you have everything you need from your baby registry. And a lot of my patients, my question is like, well, what's prepared for you? And do you have your freezer stocked? And what meals are you working on? And so I want you to shed light on that in the dietitian perspective of how we can best prepare for postpartum to like thrive.
Yeah, honestly, we start with just that. I usually frame it with my clients with the simple question of how are you going to feed yourself postpartum? Because we just simply don't think about it.
Yeah.
The switch, even most of the time from mom's perspective, the switch is just immediate, like it's on baby,
Yeah.
understandably, but mom needs a ton of support, postpartum too. So it's just simply thinking through the question, how will I feed myself? So are you going to have any support? Are there going to be people around that are going to be able to prepare you meals or to bring you super simple things like a snack or something like that? Um, are you going to prepare any meals ahead of time? Are you going to put things in the freezer? I'm a huge fan of that. If you're going to be putting things in the freezer, um, I think we tend to think about just dinners for whatever
Yeah.
reason. So think about snacks and breakfasts. Um, Specifically, especially for snacks, things that can be eaten with one hand is really helpful. So like energy balls and muffins and those types of things, even like for breakfast and lunches, things that can be eaten with one hand. So maybe
Yes.
like breakfast burritos or just sandwiches, things like that. Um, if even thinking through like the logistics of how you're going to get food in your house. So huge fan of stocking up your pantry and your freezers just with store-bought stuff as much as you can, a couple of weeks before baby is due. But then also having a plan for, okay, once that food runs out, who is going to do the grocery shopping? If
Yeah.
mom is typically the one that does the grocery shopping, um, can we have a plan for someone else to do that? Or can you just plan on doing like grocery delivery for a couple of weeks? And if someone else is going to do the grocery shopping for you, can you make a list of your staples of like, these are the foods I always want in my fridge, in my pantry, and when these, I want you to like kind of take inventory when these are running low or when we run out, then make sure we have these things.
Yeah.
That's like really easy nowadays because most grocery stores have apps, so you can like choose really specific things, so you're not just putting whatever, I want bread. You can actually pick like, this is the specific type of bread that I want, and then whoever is grocery shopping for you knows exactly what to look for. Same kind of thinking with recipes. So if someone is going to be cooking for you at all, even if it's just like a one-off type of situation, think about having some of your favorite recipes printed
Yes.
off. So people, I think, are around postpartum women, we want to help, but a lot of times we just don't know how to help.
Yeah.
So if you give someone a really specific job, like yeah, I have this grocery list. Can you go get these specific things for me? Or yeah, I have this recipe. Everything should be in the fridge for it. Can you make this specific thing for me?
Yeah.
Like giving someone a really specific job, I think is helpful. So printing off some recipes. If you're not going to have, friends and family available to help you, or even if you are, do you want to consider like a postpartum chef that's coming to either stock your freezer for you or to make things fresh every so often.
Yeah,
And then
which we can
obviously,
shout out the Well and Nourished Mama because
yeah,
she's
she's
amazing here
amazing.
locally in Columbus. And she made me some postpartum meals and amazing, worth every penny.
Yeah,
She can do the grocery shopping for you. And not only that, she's gonna like tailor the meals she makes to like gut healing and tissue healing and all the things that she knows postpartum moms need.
exactly.
I we obviously are both postpartum ourselves. I made an email of all my favorite recipes and I emailed my family those recipes.
Good idea.
And it can feel kind of vulnerable, I guess, that you're gonna like tell people what to make. But everyone was really grateful to like just be like, oh, cool, these are the recipes you want. I'm gonna go ahead and make a few of these soups and stews. And so if you can prep when you're pregnant, make an email. And it just kind of was like an ongoing email for me for like a month until I felt like I had a good amount of recipes on there. I would say I probably did focus too much on dinners and not enough
Mm-hmm.
snacks. So then when the baby came, I was like, I need snacks. I don't think people the first new moms especially are like they don't realize how hungry they're going to be. Like you're so hungry. And
Mm-hmm.
then middle of the night hungry. I don't know if you were hungry in the middle of the night, but when you're up in the middle of the night feeding, like I was so hungry myself that I couldn't fall back asleep. And if I could just stock my side table with like a muffin, a couple of those little protein bowls, and like eat a protein ball while I'm nursing or doing a bottle feed or whatever, like it was really helpful for me to like have those quick snack options in the middle of the night. And like you said, super important, one-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing too. Like, especially if you're on a two-story floor,
Yeah.
and you're going to be like upstairs where your bedroom, kitchens, and the downstairs, you absolutely should. Even if you're on a one-story house, you should absolutely like keep food around all
Yeah.
over the place. Like, think of the places that you might be nursing. You might be, baby trapped, and like have snacks around those areas as much as possible.
Yeah.
Um, and don't be afraid to go to more convenience things during this time anyway. Like nutrition is obviously super super important during this time, but
Yeah.
number one goal is just eating enough because energy needs are so high. So if you have to go to more convenience things, thankfully there are like really decent convenience options available
Yeah.
this day and age. So even like frozen vegetables, frozen pre-made burgers, frozen rice,
If you have to
mom.
do those egg white bites,
Yep,
Costco has
yep,
like the big containers of egg white bites for a
absolutely.
quick
Even like
breakfast.
full meals, like if you're local to Columbus, definitely use Stevie. But if you're not, even like the mama meals are great. They are just like frozen meals made specifically for postpartum. So just like with Stevie, they're like tailoring things. They all the nutrition things that I teach, they're making their meals according to that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all huge.
I think one thing that is a kind of exhausting is if you don't prep for other people, you get a lot of people reaching out postpartum that want to help and they say like, what can I bring you? And then you have to like use more mental energy to think about what they can bring you. So like you said, if like obviously someone else could set up a meal train for you, that's one choice. But even with the meal train, people are like, well, what can I bring you? And then you have to like use your brain of like, I don't know what would be good. Like, and it just feels like harder, but then you feel guilty even saying that because they're offering to bring you
I
something
know.
and they want to make sure it's something you like. So they're genuinely like, what do you want? And you're like, I don't know, you think about it. So if you can like prep all that in advance, then you don't have to spend all that mental energy afterwards. And then I think what's also important, at least what's coming to my mind, is because I have older children too, is that a lot of the meals that we prepped were meals that like I would enjoy or my husband and I would enjoy, but not my other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so when other people were offering to bring us stuff, it was like, cool, we're gonna have this meal, but now I also still have to make a meal for my children. And then that was like still more work for my husband.
Yeah.
So if you can even think of like quick, easy things that someone can bring you that your other children will eat too, even better, because you still have to cook for all these other humans. And I remember one girlfriend being like, what can I bring you that your kids will also eat? And I'm like, that's a great question. Not a lot. And she's like, I'm going to just steam sweet potatoes. I'm going to bring you a whole chicken. She brought me a whole chicken cooked in a pan and a whole container of sweet potatoes and a whole container of a fresh, like grilled vegetables. And it was like the most amazing thing because it just lasted for
Yeah.
days and it was easy to pick and choose. And it was something my other kids would eat too. So that's really important if you do have other children to think about that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And
what
even,
foods? Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, even like thinking through like if your husband's gonna be around for a little bit, like what even simple things like I wrote out what I usually put in my yogurt. So I'll do like roughly a cup of yogurt
Yeah.
and then cut up an apple and then like, I don't know, a good spoonful of granola or like whatever. So I like wrote out what I usually do. So when he's
Yeah.
making my yogurt, even though it's something super simple, it's pretty close to
Yeah.
what I would do for
Exactly.
myself.
Yeah, my husband was like, "So how do you make your toast? And you like it with butter, right? And
Exactly.
you want the banana sliced on it with the cinnamon?" And I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly how I want it." But you don't have to say that every single time. You just like want it delivered to
Yeah,
you in your bed or on your couch.
exactly.
So what foods should women prioritize for postpartum? Do you have any specifics that
Yeah.
you think are really important and like realistic and obtainable? And then if there are things like one example I'm thinking of is like beef liver. You should eat all the beef liver. It's so good for you. It's got packed with nutrients. But if that's not like realistic for you to consume beef liver because it's hard, either A, hard to get a hold of, um, too much work, too expensive, what are better supplemented versus getting in whole food form? And so beef liver was one thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, well that's perfect. So before I forget, first off, you should still continue to take your prenatal, high quality prenatal, um, to at least like help cover your base. It's not always it's not going to meet your full nutrient needs, of course, but at least it's going to help kind of meet your base.
Do you want to shout out a couple of brands that you like for prenatal?
Yeah, my top two are Full Well and Seeking Health. Um, yeah,
Oh, well.
Seeking Health has several. The optimal prenatal is what you
Yeah.
want. But yeah, those are my top two. Um, so yeah, like beef liver, animal foods in general are a really good place to kind of start and like branch out from. We really want to think about things that are high in protein, high in fat, things that are collagen rich. So collagen is going to be really involved in all of the structures that changed in pregnancy, now continue to change postpartum and healing. All of that collagen is really important.
Yep.
So if you just simply focus on animal foods and animal proteins, having like prioritizing your meal around an animal protein, you'll be in a really good kind of starting place. Organ meats are fantastic, but they're not going to be super doable for a lot of
Yeah.
people. So that's why I'm a huge fan of starting experimenting with those things as early as possible. I mean, if you're thinking about a pregnancy in the future, like start experiencing experimenting with those things now, so then during pregnancy it's a little bit easier, and then you can figure out what are your meals that you like those things in most often. So like lasagna is one of those things for me that I can really easily put liver in my like lasagna meat
Yeah.
mixture. I don't notice it at all. And that's something that freezes really well. So like that was something that I prioritized prepping postpartum. So if you have time, experiment with those
How do
things.
you recommend getting liver? Because the liver that we've bought has been in like cube form,
Mm,
and then we've had to go through the process of like grinding it up. And we don't have a meat grinder,
yeah.
so we've done it in our blender. And my husband just thinks it's like disgusting and a disaster and messy. And then you have to like freeze it into small cubes. And so, do you use it in cube form, or do you grind it, or do you get it pre-ground somewhere?
I think there are two main options. The easiest option is to buy. There's a really good brand, Force of
Yeah.
Nature. They have their ancestral blend. So
Yeah.
it's like large majority is ground beef, and then they have a little bit of liver and heart already ground into their beef. So it's like you just use that pound of
Yeah.
ground beef like you would
Yeah.
use any pound of ground beef, and you've already got some organ meats in there. That's the easiest.
Yep.
With convenience comes cost. It
Yeah.
is expensive,
Yeah.
but something like that is really nice. What I typically do, so we get our beef and our pork in shares. So I'll get like a quarter of a cow a year, like a half a pig a year. And when you obtain your meat like that, you get all of the, bits, like the
Sure.
organs and the bones and on the fat and all of those things. So how it typically comes for me is it's in like 1 pound packages in like strips. Um, so I make basically like a liver pate, or it's just like pureed liver. So you you cook up the liver, just like pan sear it a couple minutes on each side. I usually make like a kind of true pate. So there's like onions and cream in it, and then you just put it in the food processor. So you're blending it up, but it's already cooked at that
Got
point.
it.
So it's a little bit easier to handle. And then I have these like 4 ounce mason jars that I fill, maybe about halfway, 3/4 of the
Yeah.
way full, and then freeze those. So it's a process, but I only have to do that like maybe twice a year because I'm, prepping all of that ahead of time and then putting it in the freezer.
Right.
And then whenever I'm making a ground meat dish that has a lot of other flavors, I'll take out one of those jars and put it in there. So I mentioned like
Yeah.
lasagna, shepherd's pie is another good one to put it in,
Yep.
meatloaf, those types of things that have a lot
Chili.
of other chili. I would
You
not
really
put
only need
it
like
in,
2 to 4
yeah,
ounces of the liver,
yep,
correct? Yeah.
exactly. And that's a good ratio for 1 pound of
Yeah.
ground beef. If you're just starting, just start lower. Do like 2 ounces of liver to 1 pound of ground meat. Um, but that's what I do. But the easier option is to do like buy the like ancestral blends. And
Right.
sometimes even local butchers have their own like ancestral blends, or they'll just do it for you special. So if you're not getting like a quarter of a cow like I am, and the beef and the liver is coming with it, um, if you have like a local old timey butcher, that's the best place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those can be sometimes harder to find, or just, if you have a farm that you can buy directly from, that's a really good option too. Even if you have to travel a little bit for those places, again, you only have to do it maybe a couple of times a year because you can kind of stock up and prepare everything at once and then just use that frequently,
Sure.
periodically.
What other items would you prioritize besides the animal meat? Or especially like I'm thinking of people that, well, for one, vegetarians, what should they do? And then two, a lot of women that have to go dairy free postpartum for breastfeeding needs. And have to cut out dairy sources. I've had patients that have to cut out like eggs, dairy, soy, and then you're just like, oh my gosh, it's so many good nutrients they have to cut out if they can't do the dairy, the eggs. We obviously know those would be like top choices, good quality eggs and dairy. But what do you recommend if they can't have those things postpartum?
It depends. So if you can't have eggs, honestly, even more reason to prioritize liver because the vitamin A content. If you can't have eggs but you can have dairy, that's another good source of the vitamin A even more important to prioritize your dairy being full fat and grass fed if possible, because you are going to get more nutrients with the grass fed dairy, especially that vitamin A. And then seafood.
Yeah.
So especially like the fatty, omega-3 rich fish like salmon and those types of things are really good
Oysters.
replacement. Yeah, those are great things to have as much as you can anyway, but especially if you can't have eggs, something like salmon is really important to prioritize for the choline. And then if you can't have dairy, seafood is really nice because dairy is a main iodine source. And we don't tend to think about iodine as much postpartum, but it's really important, especially for thyroid issues. Your risk of thyroid issues postpartum goes up by 50%.
Wow.
23% of new moms will experience thyroid dysfunction, whereas just like general population, it's only like 2 to 4% of the population has thyroid
Yeah.
dysfunction.
I actually just started supplementing with iodine because my iodine was so low
Mm-hmm.
on recent blood work.
Yeah.
Um, Not to go off topic, but how important is getting blood work and following up with physicians postpartum? Because I often have a lot of women, you spend your whole pregnancy seeing your OB, and you might go to your PCP, but like not really, because they're like, oh, you're pregnant. Okay, bye. Go see your OB for a year. And then a year later, your OB doesn't want to see you anymore because you're not pregnant. And they're just like, are you on birth control? Yes, no. Okay, good. Have a good time. And then you're like postpartum and you're like, am I supposed to be seeing a doctor of some kind? And I have so many patients that they don't go to the doctor postpartum, maybe for like a year, and they've had no blood work. And I knew for myself that I just really wanted a 3 month postpartum check-in for blood work, a blood panel. Like, obviously we should get yearly physicals anyways, and a blood panel, but not a lot of women are doing that. So how important do you think it is that we do check in on some of these markers? Because like you said, thyroid and so many other things can really change once you're postpartum.
I think it's really important. I have a general kind of timeline that I'll give to clients. Typically 6 weeks is the first time that I would suggest doing blood work, but then
Okay.
probably again in like 12-ish weeks, and then maybe again at like 6 months. What I suggest testing is a little bit different. So like initially I'm a really big proponent of getting like a full look at your iron, so that iron is really tricky. We can't just look at hemoglobin and hematocrit, which is what our OBs typically do during pregnancy. We got to look at things like total iron binding capacity and percent saturation and all of that. So getting like a full comprehensive look at your iron is going to be important. Getting vitamin D tested, because mom's status for vitamin D is going to directly determine how much vitamin D is transferred via breast milk. So that's going to be important to do early. Unless a mom has symptoms of thyroid issues, I typically don't suggest doing thyroid testing until maybe 12-ish weeks.
Okay.
And doing a full thyroid panel. So that's not just TSH, which is what your doctor's probably going to do, but also T4 and T3, reverse T3, and the antibodies, especially if you've never had those tested before. I will say, this is not standard of care for the large majority of doctors. So
Yeah.
you at minimum are going to have to really advocate for yourself. Thankfully, we can order blood work, and we will do that a lot for clients, especially in these type of scenarios where we're suggesting doing blood work. Not that the blood work we're ordering is abnormal, but the timing is abnormal, or maybe like the order in which we do things is abnormal.
Yeah.
A lot of times doctors will say, well, yeah, let's check your TSH to see what your thyroid's doing. Then if that's abnormal, we'll do a full thyroid panel. We don't do that because you can have thyroid issues with a normal TSH. So we just go ahead and do a full thyroid panel. Okay. So it's just something to be aware of, that you're really going to have to advocate for yourself to be getting blood work postpartum.
Maybe it should just be standard of care that you see a postpartum dietitian.
I mean, I'm biased, but I would absolutely agree.
I, I mean, that seems to make sense in my brain.
Yeah.
Like, you see a postpartum physical therapist, you see a dietitian, and you get, all this blood work done, and you can order, like you said, you can order the blood work, and you probably, speaking from experience, I went to my PCP first, got blood work done, was given a list of supplements and recommendations from my PCP, and thankfully I know you and your knowledge, and I was like, I think I'm going to run this all by Alyssa before I just start taking everything my PCP recommends, because I think, someone like you is more of the expert in this field, unfortunately, compared to just a general PCP. And mine's even, a little bit more of like a women's health PCP, I would say, like a
Mhm.
little more knowledgeable than just your standard, go in for a cold
Yeah, I mean
kind of
that's the thing, they
PCP.
just don't know. They're just
Yeah,
not educated in nutrition. They're not educated on like how
right.
all of that nutrition stuff is connected then to blood markers. They just simply don't know. That's just not their area of expertise. So you shouldn't expect that knowledge when you go to that type of provider. It's really
Yeah,
unfortunate. They should be able to do all that, but that's just not how it is
right.
right now.
I did want to touch on, because I'm a pelvic PT, on constipation,
Mm.
and that constipation is a big problem postpartum for a lot of women. Rightfully so, because of everything shifting around and getting back organs getting back in place, and then like the passing of bowel movements in general can be a scary thing. Whether you've had a C-section or a vaginal delivery, there's tissue healing down there, and it can be a very scary thing to have a bowel movement. So we talk to our patients a lot about how to manage constipation and how the pelvic floor contributes to constipation. What do you recommend for managing constipation from a dietitian standpoint? Obviously, fiber. I don't think women truly know what that means, and like how much fiber are they getting in a day, and what other things you might recommend, specific foods.
So really, really early postpartum, like the first, I don't know, 2-ish weeks or so, um, there's a little bit of this like process. If you've already been dealing with constipation in pregnancy and we're kind of anticipating that postpartum, I would, my recommendation would probably be a little bit different. But for the typical woman that hasn't really dealt with that issue too much in pregnancy, I would honestly go to a more easily digested foods in the first week or two. So that's like really well cooked starches, really well cooked vegetables, maybe not a ton of like raw fruits and vegetables where you would, that's what you would typically think about for fiber.
Yeah.
Um, After the first week or two of initial healing, then I think that's typically the time where you really want to start ramping up fiber. Um, so yeah, fruits and vegetables, but honestly, besides like berries, fruits and vegetables aren't an amazing source of fiber with a couple of exceptions. So like berries are a really, really, really great fiber
Yeah.
source. I will say if you can eat them whole, that's ideal. Anytime you blend food up, if you're doing like a smoothie or something, it's pre-digesting it. So you actually get less fiber when you're doing like a smoothie. So if you
Okay.
can like eat the berries instead of blending
Blending
them
them
up,
up.
that's ideal.
I'm gonna
Uh,
interrupt you for a second, because my Instagram is going to cut me off here in 1 minute, because I have my limit for the day set at a certain, and then it pops up the thing where it's like, you've hit your max for the day, and I have to like hit ignore. So just so you know, that'll probably pop up in a second.
okay,
I'm going to have to hit ignore because I forgot to delete my, delete that. So
no worries.
continue.
Um, Avocados is another really, really great source of fiber. Um, Seeds, doing like chia seed pudding is, I think, the easiest way to get a ton of fiber in.
Okay, I can hear you now. Sorry.
Okay, sir.
Did you say
Um,
kiwi? Because I've heard kiwi with the skin on is like the best thing.
I did not, but kiwi is a great option. Yes, absolutely. Kiwi is a really, really good one. I said chia
Okay.
seeds. So chia seeds are like one of my
Yeah,
biggest go-tos.
love them.
Chia seed pudding, or if you know you're going to have like yogurt the next day, go ahead and mix up your chia seeds in your yogurt, let it sit overnight or at least for like an hour or so, then eat it. um,
Because they
Chia seeds,
expand. If you're not
yeah,
used to working with chia seeds, like I put them in my oatmeal, but they expand as you let them sit. So then it's kind of more of a, you're not eating just like seeds.
yeah,
You know, it's like a more soft, palatable.
and you actually get more of the like gut benefit from that. It
Okay.
creates this mucilage, and that mucilage is really really helpful for the lining of the gut. So yeah, there's not only like a palatability benefit of letting them sit, there's actually a health benefit of letting them sit
Great.
too. Um, so yeah, like an overnight oats where you're putting chia
Yes.
seeds in there, that's perfect.
Sweet
Sweet
potatoes.
potatoes. I mean, even regular potatoes. So this is always the caveat when you look at nutrition facts of sweet potatoes versus white potatoes. Sweet potatoes does have like it's like a gram more fiber. It's not a ton of
Yeah.
difference, but we're typically not eating the
The
peel of a
skin.
sweet potato, whereas you might eat that of a white
Yeah.
potato. So if you're not eating it of the sweet potato, but you are of the white actually has more
Is
fiber.
better.
So
Good
yeah,
point.
oats is another great one. Just
Yeah.
nuts and seeds in general. That's another great like snack to have on your bedside stand or like at your nursing
Are
stations. Is just
steel cut oats more fiber than rolled oats or like quick oats?
they do. They do have a little bit more fiber. Honestly, I'm not like a staunch like you have to do steel cut. I think rolled oats is fine too, but you do get more fiber with steel cut.
Yeah.
Um, Let me think of
And
those.
what's your total recommendation on fiber for the day?
At least 25 grams. More is probably better. If you tend to um, have your fiber intake lower than that, you want to slowly ramp it up. You do not want to go from like 20 grams to 30 grams overnight. You're
Okay.
going to have GI issues.
Okay.
Speaking of the other thing, especially when you're ramping up fiber, fluid is really important. And even just for general like constipation treatment, fluid is really, really important.
Yeah.
And that's something that can be really hard postpartum because your fluid needs are insane. If you're not hungry, you're going to be really, really thirsty.
Thirsty.
So, like, really always have something to drink. If you're getting sick of plain water, do like kombucha or herbal teas or broths
Yeah.
or milk, those types of things. But don't forget the electrolytes too. And the electrolytes can actually help with constipation as well.
Yes.
So, salting your food freely, maybe even putting some salt in your water, or going to a supplement like Element or Redmond's Relight, something like that
Yes.
for the
I have
electrolytes.
mine right here. I love the relight.
Yeah.
And if you want to save a little money, the bulk that you pour is much more affordable than the packets. If you need the convenience of the packets for on the go, that's awesome. But I'm a big fan of this, and then just putting a scoop in before I leave the house. So I love the Relight brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Relight and Element, really, they're like nutritionally, they're basically the same thing. And Relight actually is a little bit less expensive.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
there's good options there. And then lastly, if we need like a little extra support, doing magnesium citrate supplementally can be a good option too.
Okay.
Magnesium citrate specifically tends to be my go-to for constipation,
Okay.
whereas you might be taking like magnesium glycinate for sleep help or just like general I need more magnesium, we would want to do citrate specifically for constipation.
Gotcha.
And if you're really
That's good to know because I think nobody really talks about like I take this one
yep
um, more for sleep benefits, but you're saying if it's constipation that we should really do the citrate.
yep and if you're like really worried about that first bowel movement, which understandably, it's not a bad idea to just go ahead and start taking a little bit of magnesium citrate, really early postpartum.
Yeah.
You're there's like very little harm to doing that.
Yeah.
As with anything, you just want to start with a slightly lower dose and then work up, because you shouldn't have like diarrhea from it. But if you take too much too soon, it's possible to have almost too loose of stools. So you just kind of want to like monitor that a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, I think you can quickly go the other way if you're not used to it. I know I was taking stool softeners every day for a little while, and then a lot of women will develop a hemorrhoid or a fissure or something like that. And like, that's almost, I call a fissure is like a paper cut in
Mm,
your lip. And it's like it never heals because you're always using your lips.
yeah.
And so a fissure is like a paper cut in your, rectum. And so it's really hard for it to heal if you can't, unless you just train yourself to not poop for like 5 days. It's going to keep like opening that little paper cut. So keeping the bowel movements as soft as possible is going to help if we can get that thing to heal. I'm a big fan of like these CBD suppositories that I use rectally. It was like a game changer for me for a fissure. So for another little supplement, not orally, but literally putting a CBD suppository because they're coated in magnesium and it's basically just like coconut oil, like in hard form, and it's coated in magnesium and it just has a little CBD in it. Um,
Nice.
and that used rectally was like a game changer for my passing of bowel movements when I had a really bad fissure postpartum.
Good.
Side
Wow.
note.
Good to know.
So let's quickly change topics so we don't stay on here too long. We wanted to just hit because February is, I'm probably not going to say it right, but it's like International Prenatal Infection Prevention Month. So just like building awareness to, I guess, fetal health, right? And like how to help prevent infections prenatally. So is there anything that you can speak on to, um, in that category for diet, nutrition, how one can support fetal development? I kind of joke that I had a 10-pound baby because I drank raw milk my whole pregnancy. Like bulked her up in fat. Um, she came out ginormous. But what do you think on fetal development, nutrition?
So I had a ton of dairy in my pregnancy, and
Yeah,
that's one of those things that you will see, like, be careful of your dairy intake. You're going to have a huge baby. I had a ton of dairy, and my son was less than 8 pounds.
right.
So
And
it's
he
like,
was like nearly 43 weeks, right?
yeah, like 2 days shy of 43 weeks. So
Yeah,
yeah, just putting that out there.
right. It does not
I think,
mean you're gonna have a big baby.
right, right. Um, for the inspection standpoint, I think just working on your gut health as much as possible. Like baby's first microbiome is going to be seeded from your microbiome.
Yeah.
So getting that as healthy as possible, and then of course thinking about like the some of the first decisions around care for baby is going to make a really big difference with their microbiome too.
Okay.
But that like initial right off the bat is going to be seeded from you. So just getting your gut health as healthy as possible. So focusing on the fiber, getting some probiotics in your food, not necessarily, I mean, supplements are fine, but really focusing on like fermented foods,
Okay.
sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir, those types of things. Then from just a general like development standpoint, I think it's honestly just understanding that it's everything. Every single cell that makes up your baby until you start formula feeding or starting solids, every single cell that makes up your baby is made from food that you ate. I think just putting it in that perspective a lot of times gets women to think about like, oh yeah, this is really important, or at least I hope it does,
Yeah.
because it is huge.
Yeah.
We know that a mom's dietary choices both during pregnancy and before conception affects the baby's long-term health and determines their susceptibility to disease later in life. And mom's nutritional status can extend across future generations too. I mean, your grandchildren can be affected by how you ate during pregnancy, because a baby's epigenetic mark, which is basically like which genes are turned on or off, that occurs during pregnancy. So it's huge.
Wow.
When we think about long term health, we know that maternal diet has been linked to child's risk of diabetes, obesity, cognition, cancer, ADHD, osteoporosis, endocrine changes, all of that through pregnancy, what's called fetal programming. Um, Gosh, but then just short term, like just there's a million examples, but one that is kind of most prominent is like fish intake. So there was a really great study, it was like 12,000 mother children pairs found a really large association between childhood IQ and a mom's fish intake.
Mm.
The worst outcomes were among children whose mothers did not eat any seafood at all. And so a mom eating less than 12 ounces of seafood weekly is
Mm-hmm.
associated with significant impairment in communication skills, verbal IQ through adolescence. And then low intake of DHA specifically, which is one of those main omega-3 fatty acids. Low intake of DHA during pregnancy is associated with like growth retardation, lower test scores and neurodevelopment, fine motor skills deficit. So it's like it's really big. And then
Yeah.
I don't know if this has really been proven through research, although it's been asked a lot through research. Is even looking at the link between postpartum depression risk and a mom's omega-3 intake.
Mm.
The body is really good. It's designed to feed baby preferentially, both during pregnancy and while breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And DHA is so important for brain health for both mom and for baby that your DHA is going to be depleted to make sure that baby is getting enough. And I think that there's probably a really big connection between postpartum depression and anxiety risk and low DHA intake.
Makes
So that's just something to think about. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's a million examples like choline and glycine and zinc and all of these things. If we don't have enough of those, we see very real impacts on fetal development.
Yeah. So insightful. Thank you so much. I feel like we could talk probably for
I know.
hours. Maybe our next one we can do how we feed our babies, nutrition, baby
Yeah,
nutrition.
that'd be fun.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for doing this. Tell everybody in our community where they can find you.
Yeah. So my website and my Instagram is the same. It's just Alyssa Broadwater RD. And my DMs are always open if you have questions.
Lovely. Yeah, reach out. I think, like we said, prenatal and postpartum dietitian work is less of, the norm or standard of care. So I think hopefully we're shedding some light on the importance of potentially working with a dietitian while you're pregnant or postpartum and probably getting a ton more of your questions answered compared to what your OB can provide for you or even what your PCP can provide for you. We have one question here that maybe we'll try to answer real quick. Someone saying significant PPD in the first 16 weeks with her first pregnancy, I assume. 16 weeks now with her second. And she takes a gummy with DHA, but should I add in separate fish oil supplement?
So gummies in general have really low dose of nutrients. So most likely, yes, you probably need something else. I would aim for at least 1,200 milligrams daily of total omega-3. So that's EPA and DHA combined. But there's even good evidence that up to like 2,000 combined.
How much did you say total?
At least 1,200.
1,200
total of EPA and DHA milligrams. But there's good evidence that even up to like 2,000 combined EPA and DHA has better outcomes. So especially if you are like at higher risk for postpartum depression, I would probably err on the higher side. So almost for sure you would need an additional fish oil supplement.
So I'm looking at my cod liver oil supplement right here, and I was told cod liver specifically of any fish oil is super high in the DHA and EPA. Would you agree that it needs to be cod liver oil, or
I don't think it has to be
necessarily?
The dose of the omega-3 benefits are really going to be pretty much the same between cod liver oil and fish oil. The Cod liver oil has an additional benefit of it having vitamin A and vitamin D. I actually have a post that I'm going to be sharing on Instagram in probably like a week or so that on this topic. But like for the omega-3 purpose, you can do either fish oil or cod liver oil. It
Okay.
really doesn't matter. Oh, there was something else I was going to say with that and then I forgot. But yeah, it's either one is fine.
Okay. But the gummies not enough in
Probably
most
not.
of the time.
Probably not. Check your dose, but most likely
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Good to know. Good question. Well, yeah, maybe next time we'll do like just a Q&A of questions before we
Yes,
jump on. But thanks so much for all your insight and
absolutely.
super appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good to see you.
You too. Babies are still napping. Hopefully
Yeah.
yours too.
No,
Oh,
Daddy swooped in
oh,
and did
swooped in.
Daddy duty, but
He's gonna get there.
yes, eventually.
All right. You have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.